Okay, so you can kind of see what we got here. We have this original class, or like a laundromat, and then our init method, where we take in like the owner name of the laundromat, the address, I suppose, of the laundromat. So one just initial, this is just more like a coding style thing, is that you can, is it like this? I don't actually do it too much, but I think it's good to do. Let's see if, is it like this? Yeah. So if you can specify up front what data type you expect to be passed through here. All right. So this is like the owner name would be of type string. The address would be of type string, right? And then, you know, you could have like, let's say the year this laundromat was founded, right? That would maybe be of type integer. So this will not be, Python will not, like if you break this rule, say you pass, let's just see this. Say you pass through a integer where it should be a string. So let's say Bob, right? So this one's correct. And then we'll do 1, 2, 3. Python will still won't raise any error for you, okay? But it is, when you're writing code, you know, nice to know kind of like what is expected is one thing. Like okay, I'm about to create a laundromat. Here's the data, and the kind of data we're gonna need, right? And then also I think it's good when you know, so this is when you're using the class, and this also works for functions, but also I think like when you're writing the class, it's good to just be thinking about, okay, it takes these inputs and, you know, we expect this output. For example, for the output thing, let's say we do something like get owner name. All right, well, take self. There's not really anything else as an input, but it will expect, am I doing this wrong? Sorry, I don't use this too much, but I do think it's useful. No, string. How do you indicate it?
You had it right, it's the arrow.
It is the arrow, thank you. Yeah, so this is the output, right? Is we're saying, okay, it only takes self as an input, and we're expecting the string as the output, as the return value. So this will return, you know, self dot owner name. Okay. The reason why I don't, like, I personally am not, you know, don't use it as much is because I'm just not, like, it was introduced after, you know, more recently. So it wasn't something I like kind of started doing, but I do think it's like a good habit to employ, and you will see it in a lot of code. And I'll try to do it. All right, so now we do like, here's the name, here's the address, here's the laundromat. Okay, that's kind of one thing. So again, just to recap, you can specify what type you think each of the arguments should be, right? And this kind of like, you know, so this is just more details as to what you think, what the input, what you're specifying the input to be. And then also thinking about the output. This output, I think in Python, they'll just say, like I oftentimes see it, this is like none, which feels weird because it does return an instance. I don't know if you could do like a laundromat. It doesn't seem to like that. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, you can either specify that it returns an object, or you can say that it, like if you were at a different, maybe not within laundromat, but within another, if you had a function or something that returned an object, or with an expected a laundromat as an input, you can type in a class. Like,
oh, I get you. Yeah. So this was class like building or something like that. Right. And we could say, oh, and you also have to pass through, right? Like the building is of type building, something like that.
Yeah.
All right. Like I said, I'll try to get more used to this. I do think it's useful if you all can like start to employ this. It's not forced, but all the better. I think it will be useful for you just to think through. Okay, what are the inputs? What are the outputs of these functions I'm writing? So I'm writing get owner name. I expect it to return a string, right? And because that string is this get owner name. So that's kind of one thing I just wanted to like mention. I don't think it's super complicated, but it's a nice habit. So I wanted to not just delay it. All right, the second thing is properties. So let's talk about this. So we're already kind of, this is almost an example of a use case. Oftentimes, when you create a class, right, it's very typical for you to create like a getter and a setter method, right? Where the getter method is, if you want to, let's create a laundromat. We have this laundromat LM, and we have passing through the name, and we're also passing through like the address, say Broadway. Now, we could get the data just by doing lm.ownerName, right? So if you look at this thing, let's just look at Dunderdict, you'll see that it has these attributes, right? Owner name, address. And you can directly access that by doing lm.ownerName. All right? Oftentimes, however, and this is not just in Python, like in any programming language, you generally want to not directly access the data, but rather write a method that accesses the data. So that would be this thing, this get owner name method, right? So I can do def get owner name, create the lm, and now do lm.get owner name. Why is something like this useful? Because let's say we want the owner name to always be capitalized. I can do that, if I have a bunch of code calling get owner name, right? And now I decide, oh, you know what? I always want the owner name to be capitalized. All I need to do is go to the one function that all the rest of my code is calling and say, you know what? Now at the end of this, just tack on capitalize. And throughout my entire code base, this will work. So it's nice to, if I wasn't calling this function, if I was just directly calling lm.ownerName, right? Throughout my entire code base, everywhere in my code base, I would have to do lm.ownerName.capitalize, right? I would have to go throughout my entire code base to correct this. But if I'm relying on a getter method, then I only have to make my change in one location, and it propagates throughout my code base because the rest of my code base is all doing this, calling the getter and not directly calling the underlying attribute. Okay, so that's the use case for like why it's good to use a getter method instead of directly to call the attributes. It's the same thing, like there's similar logic for setter methods. You can, like we said, we can create an LM, like a laundromat. You can look at the attributes here, and you can update it, right? We could do lm.ownerName equals, Sam, right? And here I'm directly accessing the attribute. I'm just, the same way I can, like Python gives you this freedom of being able to set any new attribute we want, right? And it's like too loosey-goosey. So what's the problem with just directly setting an attribute or updating the value? An issue is, say, like we want to put restrictions on like what values we want here. Like maybe we want to make sure it's like first and last name, so it should be 2 words, right? Or maybe we want to just make sure it actually is a string. So here, let's say instead we do the set owner name. We have this taken self, and then we take in the name as the next thing, and I'll do this. All right, and then we'll just do self dot owner name equals the name that you passed through, and we should say that's a string, right? And the owner name, we'll call this So this is now our setter method. And, we could put something like raise, must be a string, and say something like if type of owner name is not equal to a string, then raise an error, something like that, right? There's more restrictions than just that, like things that relate to the name, or say we did have a year here, you may have like, if the year is above, is earlier than like 1900, raise an error, like just in case, because it seems like that data might be faulty, or log it, right, to check it later. So you can restrict the inputs in ways that aren't just about the type, but about the domain, okay? By the domain, I mean like matching the logic of the real universe, like the real, world, the real laundromat world in this case. Okay, so you can imagine that now, because we're using our setter, we now can add new restrictions whenever you update the data, right? To say, hey, before you update this thing, we're not just gonna like let you update it however you want, but define how, what types of updates you can make to it. Let's see if this works.
Hey, Jack.
Mm-hmm.
Your setter doesn't have a return. Is that on purpose?
That is typical in Python. That, like I say, not all languages follow that pattern, but in Python, you'll notice that when you update when you have a method that changes the data, it oftentimes will not return a value. What's an example of this is like, let's say like candies or colors is like red and yellow. And I don't think, let's just check blue. Right, what's wrong here? Yeah, you see that? Colors is not, I don't know why it's complaining, but the append method does not return a value, right? It changes the data, but it doesn't return a value. Python doesn't always follow that rule, but it has a preference for that type of rule. And so same thing with a setter. Yeah, typically, just like by convention and by the opinion of like Python writers, you generally do not return a value when you're setting. That was a good question. So the next thing, okay. So notice one thing. One thing is like we can still like make a mistake and, create our laundromat, and then be like, okay, well, here's the owner name, so let's just change the owner name. Like, if we don't know any better, right, we could just directly change this data. So normally what you'll see, this is again just like a pattern, is you'll see this underscore before the attribute name. And what this is saying is, it's kind of saying like, hey, we're kind of telling you, we prefer you do not directly access the owner name, like this property. In other words, if you've heard of like private variables are variables you simply cannot access, like inside of an object, for example, or private methods, right? From the outside, like, right? You can no longer now create. I want to delete this. So no longer can you now that I'm changing the attribute to underscore owner name, you can't just do lm.ownerName anymore, right? Because it's underscore owner name. So it's like you can't really make that mistake of directly accessing the attribute. What you can do is you can still do lm.underscore owner name, but the idea is that you know as a developer, hey, I'm like the preference is I don't do this, but I'm kind of doing it anyway, right? So at least you're getting that warning or that hint that, hey, this is supposed to be not accessed directly, but instead accessed through the method. That's the idea. So this is what you'll see lots of times in Python, right? Is you kind of have this underscore attribute, for the attribute storage, and then getter and setter methods. Okay, so far what we talked about was like getter and setter methods, right? And the idea is that, with both of these, what you're doing is you're designing like an interface. You're saying, okay, I always want owner name to return a capitalized string, and I only want setting the data to occur if the data type is a string, right? Or maybe it can't be a super long name or things like that, because we just don't believe like names with like 300 characters exist. So, right, so here you're putting restrictions or coercing the data. And the point is also that, like, because of that, now whenever you want to add a new restriction, you just have to put that restriction here in the method and not everywhere that, say, .ownerName is being called. Okay, so that was kind of the first point. And the second point is here we're like kind of reinforcing that, hey, only use the getter and setter methods by putting the underscore in front. Python knows about this pattern of like getter and setter methods, so it has a helper for you, all right? And that thing is this weird, it's called a property method. It's really a constructor, meaning it constructs an object. And you can do something like this. You can do property get owner name. And let's set it to like owner name. We'll change this eventually. But for now, let's set it to owner name something. Okay? And you know what, let's print. Okay. So all I did was outside of this function, right? I referenced this Python built-in method. It's called it builds a property object, whatever that is, and pass through, this is kind of weird, pass through this function as an argument. And then I set the result equal to this, owner name something. And let's just see what happens. And then we can go back and explain it again. So we have LM. We still have this Bob thing. And now I'm going to call this. I'm just going to do lm.ownerName something. Okay, notice a couple things. So I did lm.ownerName something. It must have run this method, right? Because we see it down here that it prints out method called. And we also see it print out the return value, Bob, being capitalized. So that's one thing. Notice the name of the method, right? Like what I'm actually calling here is determined by this, by the variable name. Okay? And then the final thing to notice is we do not put parentheses here, right? Because that's the work Python's doing for us. Python is kind of saying, hey, if you set this property object and assign it to this attribute of owner name something, then I will run the method for you. Every time you touch this, every time you like just type in owner name something without the parentheses, I will run the method for you. So why does it do something like that? It does that so that you can actually call this like owner name, right? And now if you call it owner name, then then let's think about what happens. I create a laundromat. I have this underscore owner name attribute that I'm not directly supposed to touch this underscore owner name attribute. But if I call lm.ownerName, I'm doing things the correct way, meaning I'm calling the getter method. And I don't need to do the parentheses. And the parentheses are kind of annoying, I guess. So the big benefit is like you get to pretend like you are directly, like in terms of the syntax, you're not using the parentheses. So it feels like you are directly accessing the underlying data, but really you're accessing the getter method, right? Really, you're getting the benefit of everywhere in your code base, you're accessing the getter method. And so if we say want to capitalize this, or we only want to say return the first 100 characters of somebody's name or whatever, we can just make that change in the code base within the method. And it propagates everywhere you call the getter. And now it's very natural for you to call the getter because the getter is just owner name. So you guys get the benefit of a property. The property calls your getter, allows you to easily have your getter method be called. But it feels like you're just directly accessing the attribute. Questions about this? Okay, one other error I see a lot is students we're passing through a method here directly, so it's not get owner name parentheses. What that would do is call this method and give you back the string and pass through the string to property. What we're doing is you're passing through the method directly, so it's just the name of the method here. Okay. Looking at this property thing, just to show you this a little bit more, you can let's define a method called foobar. Okay, so I just want to show you guys this property is it looks like an instance of an object, right? That's what this thing is. It's a property object, and it has different, you can see it has this fget. It has these different attributes where fget, maybe I can show you it this way. Oh, I guess I can't do that. But this fget thing now points to the foobar method. You've hooked in this method to be called. All right, and this is an instance, so you've created a property instance, and you've kind of set an attribute that the fget property, this getter property, points to this method. And you can also set an attribute of the setter method. Okay, so the setter method is going to be whenever I call, let's say it's lm.ownerName equals, let's say, and we can change the owner name to Sam, that's going to call, right, the set owner name method and run this code as self._owner name equals the name or whatever that you pass through. Okay, so what we'll do is we already created a property and passed through the method that's going to set the fget property. Then we will access this property object and set the setter fset property equal to the set owner name method. So how does that work? So if you go back here, this owner name thing equals, this is a little confusing, this actually equals that property object. So owner name points to this property object. And remember, this property object has a method on it called setter. So do owner name dot setter, and we'll pass through the set owner name function. And I think that will work. So now let's see. So we create a laundromat. We can see that we are we have the underscore owner name, but because we have this property method, if I just call owner name, it should run this, right? I have the property and I'm passing through the function. I want it to run whenever we call lm.owner name. And now, if I do lm.owner name equals, let's say Sam, that should run this code. You kind of can see it because it's going to update the underscore method. It's going to update the underscore attribute. So if I do lm.ownerName equals Sam, and then, oh, I broke it. Can't set an attribute. Oh, I'm surprised. What am I messing up? OwnerName.setter. It's breaking right here. Self.ownerName. That looks okay. OwnerName.setter. set owner name function. Why is it saying attribute error? Can't set an attribute underscore owner name. I may have to cheat. Let me see what I'm doing wrong. Owner name.setter. Oh, I think I have to call it the same thing. That might be it. I'm gonna have to, no, I am doing that. Hold on. I may have to set this equal. Sorry about this, guys. We're right here. I may have to do this. I wonder if that fixes it. No, I can think through why later. Yeah, that fixed it. So all I did was originally I did owner name.setter, but what I have to do is I have to set the return value of this still equal to my owner name, to this same owner name variable. Sorry, that's confusing. So just to recap what we did here, we set the getter, right, by having this property object passing through this initial function, and this will set get owner name as the getter function. Then, and also it assigns this thing equal to the property object. So this is a property object. Then we're saying we want the setter to be the set owner name function. And this thing also returns a property object that we are assigning also to this owner name, this same owner name attribute. So at the end, what we've done is have a property object. We have this owner name thing that actually is a property object that has set its setter and getter methods. It is confusing. Yeah, you can do that. Chinmay is pointing out that you can set the setter and getter all at once, but you can pass through multiple arguments here, but that's not something we'll do, and it will make sense why that pattern, you don't see that too often in Python. Other questions? Can you show us property.dict and explain some of the other components? I don't know. I did try to do that. I don't think it worked, though. I think one thing I could show you, though, is this. If we create this laundromat, and now let's look at the laundromat.dict. And what you can see this owner name right here? The owner name, look at what it is. It's not like a setter. The owner name is this property object. Okay, and that's stored on this class, actually, on the laundromat class. So if you do laundromat.ownerName right here, right, that's the property object that we created over here. All right, and now I wonder if there's a way, maybe there is a way. Interesting, Brian. So how did you get that? Was that by dunderdict? No, I can't do that. Maybe if I can do the dir. Yeah, you can see, well, you can see this stuff, the fget, fset, and I think what we can show you is ownerName.fget. That returns to me this function, the get owner name function. So you can see kind of what happened is, on the laundromat class, we have a property object called owner name. And what the fget method says is, when you call just call owner name, it's going to call the getter method, and the getter method is this thing, this get owner name. Why? Because we passed it through right here, right? We passed it through when we constructed the property. When you call like an instance lm.ownerName equals like Sam, that will call the fset method. Why does it call the fset method? Because we assign, when we constructed the property, we set it to this, right? And now we're accessing this property object, owner name, calling and setting the setter to be this set owner name. So let's look at that, right? It's the set owner name method. So now this thing's going to be called whenever you call lm.ownerName equals that will call the fset method on this owner name property. Okay? Oh, so you, yeah, and I guess Brian, so you can, I don't know how much this is super useful, but maybe. Yeah, so you can kind of see, this is everything I guess we have. But I think hopefully this made sense, or started to make some sense, that, okay, we are creating a property object, setting the getter, assigning the getter to be this get owner name function. Right? So now, whenever you call an instance of a laundromat dot owner name, it will call the getter function. Then we are taking that property object that's assigned to owner name and saying the setter, now assigning the setter, and saying that setter should be this set owner name. How does just that content feel to you all?
The set owner name is changing the name of the instance in the same location.
You're talking about this right here?
Yes. For example, if you scroll down, you have created an instance with Bob, right?
Yeah, exactly. So if you do this laundromat, now I do lm dot owner name, that will call my getter method, right? That will call the get owner name method. Now, if I do lm dot, we could do it two ways actually. We could call set owner name parentheses and pass through the owner name method to be Sam, argument to be Sam, and now this will say self_owner name equals Sam. Or you could do lm dot owner name equals Sam, right? And what will that do? Well, that will reference your property object, see that the setter is set owner name, take this and pass it through as an argument here, and run this function. Okay. Did that clear that up, Pally?
Yeah, now it makes more sense. Thanks.
Okay. Notice that, we actually don't want these two ways to call it. Well, I guess I don't know. There's one more thing I can show you, which is instead of doing this procedure where you are taking a function called getOwnerName and passing it into the property object, and then assigning it to this value owner name, what you can do is this. You can do @property and change this and remove this line. Okay? We're going to have to do one more thing, which is really what this will do, what this @property thing will do, is equivalent to this. It will say, okay, here's this property function, and I'm going to pass through the method or the function that's right below it as an argument to it. But the other thing it will do is it wants to assign the variable, this variable, to be the same thing as the function name. So we need to change this name to be owner name, and this one line of @property is equivalent to what we saw before. Owner name equals property of, let's call this, of the owner name function. So just putting @property, this is called a decorator. What it does is it's saying, hey, I want to give this function like a little bit of like superpowers by passing this function into this property constructor. So, this is just separate syntax for this same operation of pass the below function, take this property thing, pass the below function owner name into property, and assign the result to be equal to the same name of the function, owner name. Let's see if that worked. We're going to comment this part out for now. So what I'm saying is, I think this is another way to access my getter, to like define a getter method. So now we'll do laundromat And we have it here. So we create our laundromat, and now we'll do lm.ownerName. And you see that Bob is capitalized. Why is Bob capitalized? Because this @property thing says we are going to take this ownerName function, whatever's below here, pass it into this property constructor right here. Okay? And then and also set the return value of this property equal to the name of the function. So now that's ownerName. So now when we call ownerName, lm.ownerName, it still runs this code. So this is like, there's a reading on that. This is the next kind of level of syntax. Okay, so now, so now the next thing we can do is also use this with the setter method, like use a decorator with the setter method. And the way to do that is, remember this property, when you set this thing, this ownerName, what does this point to? It points to, you're basically doing this, ownerName property of some sort of method. Right? We called it get ownerName. And then you pass it through. Right? And now that returns to us a property object. And then what we said was we can kind of replace this whole thing by doing this @property. And that gives us, that still sets ownerName equal to the property object. The next thing you can do is you can say, you can also use a decorator. Let's say we have a set ownerName. And that will be like, you know, say name. And we'll just return the name for now. But we imagine this sets something. So what you can also do is you can use a decorator here. So what do you want to do here? Well, you want to do ownerName.setter and pass through the set ownerName. Right? In other words, you want to access this property object and say the setter, now set, you know, the setter method to be equal to this function. Okay? And have the return value still equal ownerName. So what you're doing is you're creating a property object, and when you're doing it, you're first setting, you know, establishing the getter. That's what this does. Saying property, you know, ownerName is now pointing, has a getter of this function. Then take that same property object and have the setter be equal to this function. So the way to do that with a decorator is you can do @ownerName.setter, and that will pass through this set. It will be equivalent of this. It will pass through the set ownerName function as an argument to this. Okay? So we'll do that. We'll put this @owner.setter. And we'll say the setter, what we're passing through the setter is the set ownerName. Now this is very close. The one last thing we have to do is with a decorator, whatever the name of this is what the name of this variable is going to be. So we're going to have to keep this as ownerName, I think. I think this has to also be ownerName. Let's see if that works. So now we'll do lm.laundromat. lm.ownerName is Bob. And now if I do lm.ownerName equals Sam, that seems to have worked. lm.dunderdict, you can see that changed the underscore ownerName to Sam. Why? We're creating a property object here by this, because this is the equivalent of property is the getter method creates a property instance and it sets the getter method to be whatever's below. And also sets the attribute, sets this variable name to be the name of the method. Then we are updating the property object by taking this property object, which is this thing, at owner name, and calling the setter method, establishing the setter method. And this is going to be whatever's right below here. But we want to assign the resulting property object to be the same variable name. So because of that, we're calling this method name should be the same as the original. So first it's kind of creating the property object, assigning it to be owner name. Then we are putting in the setter method as this thing below, but making sure that the property object is still assigned to the same variable name. All right. This way, when you look at, say, a laundromat class dot owner name, this thing equals the property object. Why? Because we keep assigning it to be that by, the virtue of this decorator saying I'm going to take this function name and assign it equal to this attribute. And now I'm going to take this function name and also assign it to be that attribute. So now we have this laundromat.ownerName. If you look at fget, that is this function right here. If you look at fset, that is this function right here. Yeah, I know. It's confusing. Questions before? So we have readings on this. I did ask you to look at the readings before the lecture. But we have readings and a lab. Any questions I can help you with before I move you into breakout rooms? That bad, huh? All right. Normally, this is confusing material. So, if you don't get it 100%, it's okay. All right. I'll give you guys let's say we'll still go to maybe 4:30 on moving through this material, and then potentially, you can implement this in your code base, right? The properties and the type, specifying types. Okay? I think those would be nice things to become comfortable with.